On the 29th of September, two large German transport ships, one was called the Warteland, and I don't remember the name of the other, came to Copenhagen and anchored outside the harbor of Copenhagen, and we thought that anything might happen now. And on the Friday evening, on the 30th of September, the rabbi in the synagogue in Copenhagen read this message to the congregation which you heard Dr. Orgel read. And that meant that everybody who was in the synagogue had to go immediately to home, first of all, and then to their relatives, and spread the news to everybody who could be of any assistance that now it was going to happen. And suddenly, on October the 1st, there was a blackout as usual, but all the telephones in the whole city were cut. You could not telephone anywhere, and in the evening, Gestapo troops with lorries went from house to house with the lists of the names of the Jews which they had stolen on the 17th September, and searched for the persons who were supposed to live in these houses they went to. But they were very unsuccessful. I think they had between 8,000 and 9,000 names on their lists, and they got hold of 202 people that night of the 1st of October, and the rest had disappeared. And that meant that the Jews of Copenhagen and other places in the country had gone into hiding, but it is not very easy to hide for any length of period when they're under conditions of war, and when there's a blackout, when you have rationing cards, and there's a curfew, and you cannot walk in the streets without a written permission from the German military quarters. So they could only stay in hiding in cellars and with friends and in other places for a limited time. And then it happened so that most of the Jews did not know at all where they should go. It was all right to stay with friends and other people for a couple of days or more, but that could not go on forever, and it would very soon be known that they were there. But first of all, it must be realized that they were not betrayed. I don't think in a single case to the Germans that there were some Copenhagen Jews living with another Copenhagen family. And the second thing is that to get some kind of advice in a situation where nobody knows where you can go to, they almost all turned to their family doctor. And that is a great tribute to the Danish medical profession, which we have never forgotten, that a whole people in distress, all of them turned to their doctor for advice. They did not turn to their lawyer or to anybody else, but to their doctor, because they knew that they could trust him, and he could possibly give them some advice. And that is the reason why Bispebjerg Hospital came into the picture at that time, because some of the doctors in Copenhagen knew that we had admitted some Jewish people the days before this happened, and then they thought that we would probably or possibly be able to help some more, and to help them to the only possibility which existed, and that was to get them across to Sweden. And as Dr. Orgel mentioned, a medical student who's now a professor of anesthesiology asked me on the 7th of October, when this has lasted for almost a week, and where apparently a lot of people could not keep in hiding any longer, but something had to happen. He asked me if we could not receive 40 Copenhagen Jews in Bispebjerg Hospital and try to arrange transport to Sweden, which of course must be secret, and see if we could get them away from Denmark in such a method. And that, as Dr. Orgel described, it was all arranged with these doctors, family doctors, and the medical student. And on the morning of the 8th of October, they came to the hospital, and it's a large hospital placed in a sort of park area, and there's a chapel, and it was arranged that they should go up to the chapel and then go into the chapel in order that they should not be seen by any Germans or Gestapo people in plain clothes, and stay there until transport was arranged, and that it was arranged at that time so that they could go on board a couple of trucks and come down to the harbor, where 2 fishing vessels were hired by us to get them across to Sweden. And that all worked extremely well. It worked too well, because instead of 40, there were 180 within a couple of hours. And it was very difficult to find out who was first in the queue, as there wasn't a queue, because they were all inside the chapel. And it was necessary for somebody to take action and not to discuss. So as we had the 2 trucks, covered trucks, waiting, we just took 40 people out of these 180 and sent them off to the harbor area, and they got on board the boat and they got to Sweden all right. But then we were still left with 140 people, and it was now about midday, and they must have something to eat. Fortunately, the weather was extremely nice, and we took them all down to the lecture room in the Department of Psychiatry, which is not very far from the chapel, and then we had to start to think. And the nurses, the matron of the Department of Psychiatry, Nurse Mogensen, was extremely good, and she got food for all these people, and she gave the ones who were most scared the sedatives, who knew so well about from her own department, and everything was rather quiet. But it was difficult to, or impossible to, get hold of boats or other kinds of shipping without any notice, and we were caught completely unprepared. So we decided that we must keep all these people not in the hospital, but just outside the hospital, where the nurses' quarters were and still are. And the nurses of our hospital have some very nice small apartments, usually consisting of 2 rooms, and we could easily accommodate these 140 people in the nurses' apartments. And the next day, on the 9th of October, the matron of the whole hospital, Miss Korsholm, offered us to take over her flat completely as a kind of office, and I went to the telephone exchange in Copenhagen and spoke with the managing director and told him that if anybody listened in upon our lines, he was going to warn me, and furthermore, I would like to have a couple of extra telephones installed in the matron's flat, and as it was completely impossible during the war to get a telephone, I was quite amazed that when I came back from my talk with the director. The telephones were already there and working. So he understood the situation extremely well. And then we had to set up a sailing department, a shipping department, and Dr. Schmidt from our hospital and some people, a civil engineer called Peter Hartmann and others, got working on this with great energy. That wasn't as easy as it sounds, because you had to get hold of the right people. You could not ask everyone in the harbor to ferry 20 Jews across to Sweden. You could ask, fortunately, the harbor police. They were completely reliable and hated the Germans. You could ask the customs people, who had quite a few boats, and they would do it also. But that wasn't enough, and we had to make a kind of contracts with fishermen, and that was quite reasonable that they should be paid, and paid well, for what they did, because they were running a considerable risk. First of all, risking their lives, and secondly, they would certainly lose their boats, which, as you know, are of great value in ready money. And that meant that we had to get hold first of the reliable people, then to find out what they wanted for their boat as a ferry, and then to see if we could arrange transport from certain places where you could take the Jews down to the harbor area in different places without being seen by the Germans, because the Germans, of course, guarded the whole coast very jealously, as they feared and landings and invasions and so on from all sides. On the following day, on the 9th of October, we got 9 small groups, altogether about 100 people, off to Sweden, and they all landed safely in Sweden. In exchange for the 100 people we sent off, we got 300, I wouldn't say back, but new ones, because we had decided that it was necessary to expose our organization to a considerable risk by making it public that Jews who were in distress could come to our hospital and to this particular address where the matron, Miss Korsholm's flat apartment was. Because the whole undertaking would be of no use if people were hiding, if they were dying from lack of food, or if they were caught by Germans from that single reason that they did not know where they should go. And from tactical reasons, we divided the receiving end of the organization in the hospital completely from the sailing end, so that I was the only person who knew where the people should go and when and how many. And I was in connection with one man in the shipping department who was the only one who knew how many we wanted to send off and at which times. I don't know if you understand me, that our connection was a very, very narrow one, and that could be broken at any moment, and if I was arrested, I could, if I was tortured or anything else, I could name him, Dr. Schmidt, and he could name me, but otherwise I did not want to know anything about the shipping organization. Now, they did a very good job and established certain routes from different places in the harbor area of Copenhagen and along the coast of the island of Zealand, and we did not lose a single one of the 2,000 Jews who came to us and whom we sent off.